Okay, tonight we're talking about the book of Ruth. Okay, the word Ruth in Hebrew means friend. And the book of Ruth is found in the Old Testament between Judges and 1 Samuel. And it is in the history. It's a book on history. Samuel is the one that is credited for writing the book of Ruth.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to get there with you. There we go.
Okay. And there are 4 chapters in the book of Ruth. And it was most likely written during or took place during the judgeship of Jair. And that's between 1126 and 1105 BC. And that is found in Judges 10, 3 through 5. The era of the book is from Judges. The purpose of the book is to provide information as to certain activities and customs, emphasizing on the sovereign activity of God working in the affairs of man. In Ruth, it starts out with Naomi and her husband Elimelech they lived in Bethlehem in Judea, and there was a famine in that land. So they were going from Bethlehem or from Judea into Moab, where they could live, and they had more food to eat. During the time that they were there, Naomi's husband, their 2 sons went with them. Naomi's husband, Elimelech, died while they were there. So her 2 sons married women from Moab. And they lived there about 10 years before Naomi heard that the famine in Judea had ended, and now there was plenty of food there. So Naomi told her daughters-in-law that they were going to go back to Judea, where they could find someone maybe to take care of them. So they pack up their stuff and they start to Judea. Naomi, during this time, as they're walking, Naomi realizes that a single foreign woman in Judea would have a really hard time. So she decided to tell her 2 daughter-in-laws to go back because they were still young enough that they could find husbands in their own land. So she told them to go back home. And Orpah immediately says, okay, and takes off.
See ya.
Yeah, see you around. But Ruth said, no, I want to go with you. Now let's see a little clip from this.
Sorry, I'm moving slow today.
It's been a rough day.
It's been a rough day. I'll get there in a second. Okay, there we go.
Go home.
I don't want to go home.
Go back to your mother's house.
I want to stay with you.
Go back to your mother's house.
Where you go, I will go. Where you live, I will live. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God.
Okay, let's be on our way then.
Woohoo! It's the award winner.
That was a girl, Bob.
I did everything.
Awesome. Okay, so
I felt like I was there.
Yeah, I know, right?
Really? I thought that was awesome.
And didn't the hill behind the church look like Moab? I'm just saying.
Wow. It's like being there.
Okay. After Ruth decides to go on with Naomi, they travel on to Judea. Well, now we got to realize too, back in those days, two women traveling alone really was not safe. But they made it to Judea, and when they got there, the women saw Naomi coming, and they were all amazed. They said, "Is that not Naomi?" And Naomi said, "Don't call me Naomi, because when I left, I was full, and I have come back empty, because God has been bitter with me. So call me Mara," which in Hebrew, Mara means bitter. So Naomi and Ruth found a place to live, and Naomi told Ruth to go out and find a field where she could pick up barley along behind the servants. And so Ruth was in this field, and she was picking up barley.
Do you remember that was a law from the old? Do y'all remember when we did was that in Leviticus, Tim, or it was talking about leave some in the fields for others,
for the foreigners and the poor.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry,
yeah.
Gleaning.
So Ruth is following behind these girls, picking up the leftover barley, when along comes Boaz. Well, Boaz is talking to the foreman, and he says, "Who's that girl over there?" So I'm doing a little paraphrasing here.
You can do that.
So the foreman tells him that she's the Moabite woman that come back with Naomi. And Boaz had already heard of the kindness that Ruth had shown to her mother-in-law. So he told Ruth that she could follow behind his girls and to stay with his servant girls. Don't go in any other field, because it just wasn't safe. And he told her, and he also told the men that worked for him, do not touch her. Do not chastise her. Do not say anything to her. Let her let her glean in my field. And he even at one point told them to leave a little extra for her. And he also told her she could drink from the water bowls that they drank from, and that he even invited her to have a meal with them. And she ate all that she wanted, and she had a little left over, so she took that home to Naomi. Well, when she gets home to Naomi, Naomi asked her where she worked, what field she worked in. She said, "I worked in the field of Boaz." Naomi gets all excited because Boaz is a kinsman, and he is their kinsman redeemer. A kinsman redeemer.
You don't have to look it up. You know.
I do know.
You know it.
A kinsman redeemer is a person related to them that had the privilege or the responsibility to rescue another kinsman from poverty or just whatever trouble, whatever had gone wrong in their life. And so Naomi had Ruth keep going back to Boaz's field. Boaz found favor with Ruth, and then Naomi tells her of something that she needed to do. In other words, she actually proposed to Boaz by going and laying at his feet in the threshing. Is that wrong?
No, I'm like, it was just scandalous, right?
Yeah, that was not done back then.
Sorry.
No, you're right. It wasn't done. But she went to the threshing floor where Boaz would have been sleeping that night, and she pulled the cover back from his feet and laid down at his feet. And she asked him to be their redeemer. And he told her that he would, but there was another person in line ahead of him. So he had to go and make sure that man did not want to marry Ruth. And by marrying Ruth, he would also be purchasing all of the land that Naomi and Elimelech owned. So Boaz did this. He goes to his other kinsman and asked him if he wanted the land. The guy said, well, I want the land, but I don't want to marry Ruth. So Boaz said, well, I'll marry Ruth. So the guy gave his permission for Boaz to take the land and marry Ruth. They get married. They have a son. Obed was the son born of Boaz and Ruth, and he was the father of Jesse, who Jesse was the father of King David. Ruth, being a foreigner, is in the direct line or the direct lineage of Jesus Christ. One of the questions is, what purpose does this book have? And I think it's to provide information as certain activities and customs, and to show the sovereign activity of God working in the affairs of man. In this book, God is not the narrator, when we think of Samuel, does not actually mention God himself. But God is mentioned by Naomi, Ruth, Boaz, or maybe not Ruth, but Boaz. But the narrator himself does not really mention God. But God is, to me, is all over that. Is all over that book, because he's working behind the scenes to arrange a place for Ruth to go, a place for Naomi, kinsman redeemer. So God is working, he's all over that to provide for Naomi and Ruth. And also Boaz kind of takes on a role similar to Christ, because he is redeeming Ruth and Naomi in the same way that Christ has redeemed us, or saved us from our sins, and saved us from what we could not save ourselves from. What would you have done, or how do you think you would have felt if you were Ruth, leaving your country, your family, your country, and everything you know, to go with someone, to go to another land, and you knew nothing of the customs or anything?
Be weird. All I got.
I don't know if I would have been brave enough to do that.
I don't know if I would have either, because I know I'm not brave enough to do something like that today.
It's like when Alan and I were dating, we'd go visit his family, and you couldn't understand what the people at McDonald's said, you know? You're like, what? You know, and I mean, they were different, and that was just 2 states away. Can you imagine? That was an entirely different country. I think if my husband was gone, my inclination would be to go back to my parents, that would have been where I went. I wonder what motivated Ruth to stay with Naomi. You think it was her love for Naomi?
It was, I believe it was her love for Naomi, but
I would have to agree with that. I would have to say that there had to have been a closeness that came about during the time that their husbands were alive, that Naomi, nurtured, I think. so much so that Ruth felt more like she was like a mother to her as opposed to a mother-in-law, you know. And I
When you
just
think
she
about their
felt-
shared
yeah.
experiences too,
Mhm.
losing their spouses
Right.
and grieving all that together, and even just the fear that they would have felt from being all alone, that had to be a frightening
Yeah.
experience. And
And
so
I
that
think
probably
because of
bonded
her
them.
love, she didn't want to see Naomi have to travel alone too. That's
Well,
just my take.
Honestly, for myself, thinking about that, I would much rather a stranger choose a husband for me than my family.
Well, we know your family.
So I would. So
This is gonna be on YouTube.
I know. I'll edit that later.
So don't you think? Because back in that day, they the families did choose the husbands. That was one of the customs, and I don't like that custom. I think that's about all I've got. Oh, how would you? Here's a question for you guys. How would y'all feel if a woman proposed to you?
I would actually.
Greg, how did it feel?
I would say, is this legal? I would say, is this legal?
Yeah, leave here.
No, I probably wouldn't.
Wasn't that a movie? Yeah.
No, it's legal.
That was before leap year started.
I don't know what I would say. I wouldn't know. Until you put in a position like that, I think you would probably say something, but I don't know. My kind of personality, I probably wouldn't worry about it.
Boaz was probably pretty successful then. He had all those fields and servants. And
But he also told her to stay there, so no one else would see her, and so no one else would see her leaving, because she was a woman of noble character, is how he described her, and he was also described as a person of noble character. So he did not want to damage her reputation by having others see her there with him.
that's kind of a cool concept to think about, a man protecting the reputation of a woman, that we don't see as much today.
No.
You know, that there was something noble about that character that said, I don't want to do anything to bring shame on you or have people misinterpret what you've done, you know. And so to me, there's something very noble about that on Boaz's part.
Well, here's a question: is what are some significant lessons learned from this book? And I wrote down, Naomi thought that God had cursed her because both her husband and both her sons had died, and she was too old to remarry and too old to have children. So she was left pretty much all alone until Ruth went back with her. But she thought God had cursed her, but instead he had blessed her. He had blessed her with a loving daughter-in-law who blessed her with a grandchild. And she is in the lineage of Christ. So what she thought was a curse turned out really to be a blessing.
Isn't that like us sometimes?
A lot like us sometimes.
How could you do this to me? 10
We're-
years later. Oh.
Can I read verse 14 from
Yes.
chapter 4? Because this is Naomi. Remember that Naomi came back saying, I went full, but I came back empty.
Right.
And then I think it's verse 14, the women said to Naomi, I guess this is the women of the town, praise be to the Lord who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons has given him birth. And it says Naomi took the child in her arms and cared for him. And the women living there said Naomi has a son. And I mean, I think that's just a beautiful picture of restoration for Naomi. because she lost everything.
Yeah.
You know, and imagine losing your husband and your sons. She really did feel empty, I imagine. But then you see the other women praising her for what God had done to restore her.
She didn't just get a son. I mean,
Yeah.
she got, they named him Obed, and it was Jesse's
Right.
father, and it was
Yeah.
David's grandfather, so she was in a lineage of kings. I mean,
Yeah.
kings came out of her,
Yeah.
you know. So he didn't just restore two women that lost their husbands and sons and whatever, had to come
He
back
brought them
home.
into his story, too.
Right? Kind of like Mephibosheth, whenever he had lost everything, and that King David went looking for him, brought him back to the king's table, you know. So
Mhm. Yeah.
it's a restoration thing.
Very cool. I think the other thing I think is cool about Ruth is God uses ordinary people, like you said, as a part of his story. And he brings foreigners into the story as well. So it's not just a blood right. There's a faith right. She said, your God will be my God. And so when she said that, she became one of God's children, you know, because of her faith. You know, she chose to put her faith in him. And so he made Ruth a part of the lineage of Christ as well. And, you know, if you look through that lineage of Christ, you wouldn't expect to see a Moabite there. But there she was because of her faith. And that's a beautiful story.
There are actually 5 women mentioned in the lineage of Christ. Tamar is the first. And then Rahab, who was Boaz's mother? Grandmother? Mother, I think.
Really?
Rahab, and then Ruth, and then Bathsheba, and then Mary, the mother of Christ. Am I right?
Because the end of Ruth is the genealogy of David, right?
Right.
Yeah. Salmon was the father of Boaz. Isn't Salmon the one who married Rahab? I think
He
it
married
is.
Rahab.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
Interesting.
Don't you just feel like you know the family now? Oh, we studied him.
Interesting.
Okay, where did you see Jesus in this book?
The kinsman redeemer.
Definitely.
What'd you say?
She said the kinsman redeemer. Yeah, and this is what we know about the kinsman redeemer. So he redeems those who have no power and who can't necessarily do anything for him. And so in that way, Jesus was the same way, that he gave himself for us, not because we were worthy or because we could give anything back to him. It's just an act of love and kindness. So I think Boaz showed that same part.
It has been said that Ruth is also a great love story because of the love that she showed for Naomi, and then the love that Boaz showed for her.
Yeah, well, think about the fact that, you know, like you said, Boaz was this, you know, high and mighty who had all this land and all these people working for him. And, you know, this woman from a different country comes and lays at his feet. And I'm like, wait a minute. I got all this money and all this stuff. Who do you think you are coming in here? You know, he could have been like that. He wasn't, of course. But that kind of tells you that, you know, there must have been something there even before she came. You know, she was only probably working there for a short time, but had to be that he saw something in her immediately that, you know, led him to think, I like this girl, you know, and basically even the first day he did. But
Or it could have been a God thing, right?
that's what I was getting to.
Yeah.
Was it just him, or was it the fact that God placed that heart in him towards her to draw her to him, so that then she wouldn't feel, you know, as badly about doing what Naomi told her she needed to do, you know. Because that had to be a tricky thing, you know, telling her to go and lay at his feet and all that. Wait a minute.
Well, not only was it a tricky thing, but it took a boldness.
Right.
And what I had a friend one time called it a holy boldness.
Yeah.
But it took a boldness for her to do that.
I think so.
I mean, it would even to this day, it would take a boldness for a woman to do something like that. For me, anyway.
Well, it was humbling too. So it was bold, but it was humbling at the same time.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine what it would have been like to live in a day like that, where where the women needed
Had to
a man
have.
to rescue them.
Yeah.
And so she didn't lay next to him; she laid at his feet, which is a whole different posture.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So,
It shows a sign of servanthood. When I would think when you lay at someone's feet, or because that's the lowest form is to be a servant.
Yeah.
But Boaz could have, when he saw her in the field, he could have chased her off. He could have told her, "I don't want you in my field." And he could have told his workers every time they see her to run her off, but he didn't do that. He told them, "Don't bother her. Let her stay."
Like God had a part in that.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, like you said, Boaz is a pious man, and you get that from his greeting when he walks into the field and talks to his servants there. Yeah. The greeting that he gives them, "Peace be with you," or "The Lord be with you," it's the greeting of the priestly class, and his workers answer back, "And the Lord bless you." So their language isn't coarse; it's a very pious interaction, and that's shown at the very first when you're introduced to Boaz.
Cool. Good observation.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And even the middle, that being in the era of Judges too, where there was so much darkness, it's nice to see this community where people are righteous.
Yeah, just think about people out working in the fields today. They probably don't greet each other that way.
Yeah. They say hola.
They probably do.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to have to delete that too. Sorry.
And he even greeted Ruth that first time. What? He even greeted Ruth that first time in the same way that he did his other servants, or the people that were working in his field.
That was pretty cool.
I have to bring this up because I think this is just so cool. Verses 6 through, I guess it's 9 or 10. How did they do the exchange of property? I just think it's so cool.
Is that chapter 4?
Where they take their sandals
with their shoes?
Yeah. I mean, it was just like, okay, I'll let you do it. And he took his shoe off, It's like, oh, okay.
That was to show the other townsmen that, yes, he was given that
I know
right.
we had done that before, but it just, in the midst of all this, the love story and the way God is working and all, and here we got a shoe coming into them.
I think that was a very intentional act.
Yeah.
You think that's why they did it? Because it's like, you couldn't say, no, I didn't shook your hand, I didn't mean that.
Right. Yeah, I
Like,
didn't mean it. I shook your hand, but that was just a greeting. No,
Yeah.
I took my shoe off.
Yeah.
That's pretty intentional.
I'll come back with one lunch.
Yeah. Wife's going, where's your shoe? He's like, you'll be happy I gave that shoe away.
He didn't say he put it back on.
You could have had another woman in
Yeah.
Okay. I think I've lost control.
You started it.
Okay, our memory verse is chapter 1, verse 16, is it? But Ruth replied, "Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back." Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God.
Amen.
What did you read 17?
No.
Oh, okay.
I wonder what gave her that. I mean, she had her mom and dad, but gave her that much closeness with her mother-in-law that she was.
I think it's kind of like what Kathy said earlier, that she, during the time that she was married to Naomi's son, they bonded, and they were very close during that time. And it doesn't say anything about Ruth's family or how she was treated in her own family before she was married into Naomi.
True. You don't know anything about her family.
So that could have been that could have had a lot to do with it. Families can have a lot to do with decisions sometimes.
Or it could have been a spiritual decision too, that she could have seen how God was in her family and decided that she wanted that to be her God.
I think that brings us to the point, actually Greg and I were having this discussion earlier about how the whole idea of who people see us to be. You know, obviously Naomi was a person who loved God and who showed it. So then Ruth coming along, you know, even throughout the time that she was married to Naomi's son and they lived together, she saw God in Naomi. And that, I think, was probably part of what drew her. And, you know, for us today, we have to remember we are the light. So we have to be the ones shining that light so that other people see that in us. That's a good lesson.
So that people want to know our God.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I think it's so cool that Ruth did not hesitate to say, your God will be my God. And she was all in at that point.
Good job, Dolly. Very good. Yay! It's almost harder to do a 4-chapter book, isn't it? Because you
got to stretch it out.
Yeah.
But I love the book of Ruth.
Yeah.
Because there's just so much in those four little chapters. And it's just, well, it talks about loyalty, love, faith, a lot of different things right there in that one, poverty, redemption. It talks about there's a lot of different things in there, and I love it when God works behind the scenes, and he's got his hands in everything, and you don't see it until you come out of it or until the end of it. Then you look back and it's like, wow, that was God.
And when I thought I was empty, I was really full.
Yep.
Yeah. Very cool. I think too, we're probably going to preach through Ruth pretty soon. And one of the things reason I want to do that is we see a lot of women's Bible studies on Ruth, but you don't see it preached to mixed audiences very often. I think I don't know how many men have really considered the teaching of Ruth and how it informs their life and their relationship with God. And so I think it'll be interesting to dig a little deeper into some of those things.
Ruth has honor and it has integrity in there too, because he, she said this day he will not quit until he gets this resolved. And he went and got the other man and made the deal with him, and they did the covenant with the shoe, not a blood covenant, it was a shoe. That was their covenant right then, and he got it all resolved, and then he honored her and married her, and so he was a man of honor and integrity too. So he had a good part. He, like you said, he could be a wealthy man, and who are you to come in here, He accepted, because then if the person's brother dies and then you marry the next one, remember?
Right.
That's, I don't know if that was at that time or not, but he honored. He was a very good man of honor.
He could have just made her a servant.
Yeah. But he did what he said he was going to do.
Very cool. All right. So you're done? You're good?
That's all I've got.